among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason, God will send them strong delusion, focus on that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. I'm confused. Didn't the first verse we read start out with, they knew God? It doesn't sound like that anymore to me, does it? It doesn't sound like they know God anymore. Do you see how quickly they have stepped backwards? Do you see how sin has grown in just such a short phase? We're going to see, beginning in verse 26, that he takes another step away. For this reason, God gave them up, for the reasons we've just read, he gave them up, to vile passions. For even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which was due. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. Not only did they dishonor God and dishonor themselves, because God gave up on them and continually had to step farther away from them and backed out of their lives, they started to do things that were completely unnatural. Homosexuality is a consequence of being far removed from God. They did not like to retain God in their knowledge. They simply knew what they were doing was against God, so they didn't even want to think about him. When we're that sinful, we don't want to think about somebody judging us, do we? Psalms chapter 81 and verse 11. But my people would not heed my voice, and Israel would have none of me. So I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsel. Focusing on the concept of God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. I want you all to understand, in as simple terms as I can make it, this is a sorrowful thing for God. He did not want to leave them. The question is, should God stay if he's unwanted, especially after all he's done for us? Should he have to put up with that? I know this has been negative this far. Now I want us to think about the beauty of this. The beauty is in the opposite proposal. If God gives up on the people that walk away from him, what does he do for the people that draw close to him? Turn in your Bibles to James chapter 4 and verse 8. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. See, with the whole practice makes perfect concept, we're practicing something. Either we're practicing righteousness or we're practicing unrighteousness. We're either getting closer to God or we're getting farther away from him. 1 Chronicles chapter 28 and verse 9 paints this contrast better than I could possibly ever do it. David, talking to his son Solomon, says, "As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve him with a loyal heart and with a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands all the intent of the thoughts. Now pay attention to the end. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will cast you off forever. It's black and white, either or. Either you're seeking him or you're not. I can't make it any simpler than that. Now moving on, after God has stepped away from them these 3 times, and he completely gave them over to a mind that did not want to think about him any longer. What happened? There was an emptiness left by the absence of God. So if you focus on verse 29, what is the first words? Being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. Not only did these things have a place in their life, but their life was filled with them. There was absolutely no room for God. We only have so much time. We only have so many thoughts. We only have so many opportunities. What do we fill those things up with? And does God have any place in there? Each step God took away, they filled it up with more wickedness. The example that sticks out the most to me is in Genesis, chapter 6 and verse 11. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. We know what he did then, didn't we? Don't we? He destroyed the world and started over again, because that world didn't have any room for God in it. By allowing sin to get a foothold, just that small fraction that they started out with, they allowed themselves to progress. What I like about this passage is that we have the opportunity to do the reverse of everything that they did. And if I tried to explain the reverse of every one of those things, we would be here all afternoon. So what I've done is I've focused on verse 31. I focused on verse 31. But before we look at 31, Ephesians 3:19 says, "To know the love of Christ, which passes knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God." As Christians, we should desire to be filled with God instead of the negatives. Are we taking God out, or are we putting God in? Like I said, it's black or white. Philippians chapter 1 and verse 11 says, "Being filled with the fruits of righteousness, which are by Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God." Remember, one of the first things they did was they stopped glorifying God? If we want to glorify God, we've got to fill him up in our life. It's that simple. So what can we do? Focusing on verse 31, it's got this whole list of undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. Take the "un" off. Be discerning. Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 14. "But solid food belongs to those who are full of age, that is, those who by reason of use have their sense exercised to discern good from evil."